Hey everyone, today we're going to go ahead and start our STAR review, and we're going to start with solving multi-step equations. Now, before we can start working these examples, we are going to talk about the steps when solving equations. So I'm going to write in my foldable, and I need you to be following along and writing in your foldable as well. So if we remember, step one when solving equations is to eliminate the fraction. All right. And then we have step two. And for us, step two is to eliminate parentheses. Okay. And then our third step is going to be to combine like terms. Step number 4 is to move the variables to one side. Or to the same side. Guys, if you need to pause this video to write down anything, please do. All right, now for step number 5, we're going to move our constants to the other side of that equal sign. And then our last step is to divide by the coefficient. And remember that coefficient is the number touching the variable. So we're going to divide by the coefficient. Okay, so if at any point you need a pause so that you can make sure your foldable has all 6 steps, please do. And then we're going to go ahead and move down here to example 1 and example 2. Okay. Ooh, example 1. It has fractions all in it. Example 1 is 3/4 x plus 1/2 equals 1/2 x plus 1/4. Now for me, one of the first things that I like to do is to draw a line down that equal sign. It helps me keep my thoughts organized, but it also reminds me that in order to move across that line, I need to do the inverse operation or the opposite operation of what's happening. Okay, so if I remember my steps, my first step is to eliminate my fraction. Now, I know most of you want to go ahead and turn these fractions into decimals, but please do not do that. Okay, we can get rid of all the fractions in one step, and that's what we're going to go ahead and do. Now, to get rid of my fraction, I'm going to multiply every term or every part of this equation by the same number. And the number that I'm going to pick is going to be my common denominator, my least common denominator. So out of 2 and 4, to pick my least common denominator, I am going to pick 4 because I know 2 times 2 would give me 4. Okay. So, like I said, I'm going to multiply every single number in this equation by 4 so that I can get rid of all of my fractions. Okay. So I have my calculator. And I'm going to do 3/4, and I'm going to multiply it by 4. So I get 3, and these are x's, so that's going to be 3 x's. Then I got half of 4, or 1/2 times 4, and that's going to give me 2. 4 is a positive, and I have a plus here, so this is going to be plus 2. equals, okay, we just did 1/2 and we got 2, and those have x's on them. And then I need to do 1/4 times 4. Okay, when I do that, I get 1. So I'm going to put plus 1. So you did not have to turn that into a decimal at all. In that first step, we just got rid of all of the fractions by multiplying every single number in this equation by the common denominator. Okay, so if I look at my steps, step 2 is to eliminate parentheses, but I don't have any parentheses in my problem. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to step 3, which is to combine like terms. So if I look at my equation, I can tell that on the left side of this equation, if I'm only looking at the left, I have an x and I have a 2. Those are not the same terms, so I can't combine them. So then if I look over here at the right, I have a 2x and I have a 1. Those are also different, so I'm going to move on. I'm done with step 3, which was to combine like terms. So step 4, move the variable to the same side. Now, it doesn't matter which side of the equation, of the equal sign, I put the variable, but I personally like to move my smallest x over. Because when I move the smallest x over, I'm going to end up with a positive x. So that's my personal preference, but it doesn't matter which side of the equation that we move it over to. So I have 3 x's and 2 x's. Again, for me, I'm just going to pick the smaller x. So that's going to be 2 x's. And those are a positive 2x. So I'm going to need to do the opposite, which would be to minus or a negative 2x. And I do that so that I can make a 0 pair. Because positive 2 minus 2 will give me 0. And then whatever I do on the right side, I have to do on the left side. And I'm going to subtract this 2 x's from my other variable. So I'm going to have 3x minus 2x, and that's going to leave me with 1x. Now, I don't need to write the 1 there because anything times 1 is itself. Now I'm left with a plus 2, so I'm going to move that down, and then I'm left with 1 over here on the right. So I'm done with step number 4, and I'm going to move on to do step number 5. And it says move constants to the other side. So I moved my x's over here to the left. So that means I'm going to move this constant or this number over here to the right. So I have a positive 2 that I need to move over. And I know the opposite of positive is negative or to subtract. So I'm going to subtract 2 so that I can make that 0 pair. And I'm going to subtract it to the right over here. So I have x left over here on the left equals, and then I have 1 minus 2. Okay, well, 1 minus 2 is going to give me a negative 1. And I don't have a coefficient. I got my 1x all by itself. So that is my answer to my first example. Okay, again, if you need to pause it, if you need to rewind it, please feel free to do that to make sure your foldable looks just like mine. Right? So let's go ahead and move on to example number 2. And this time I have negative 5 times 4x minus 2 equals negative 2 times 3 plus 6x. So just like on the first example, I'm going to start by drawing that line down the middle. And then I'm going to go ahead and start with step 1, which is to eliminate fractions. I don't have any fractions in this problem, so I'm going to move on to step 2, and that is to eliminate parentheses. And to get rid of the parentheses, I need to distribute. So I need to take that number outside of the parentheses and multiply it to the numbers inside of the parentheses. Okay. So over here on the left side, I have a negative 5 times a positive 4. A negative times a positive is going to give me a negative, and then 5 times 4 is 20, and these are x's, so I'm going to put my x on it. So then I take this negative 5 and I need to multiply it to a negative 2. So a negative times a negative is going to be a positive, and then 5 times 2 is 10. So over here on the right side, I'm taking a negative 2, and I'm going to multiply it over here to a positive 3. So a negative times a positive is going to give me a negative, and then 2 times 3 is 6. Then I take my negative 2, and I'm going to multiply it over here to a positive 6. So a negative times a positive is a negative, and 2 times 6 is going to be 12. Now these have x's, so I do need to make sure to write that x down. And then I can move on to step 3, which is to combine like terms. So if I look at the left side, I have a variable and then I have a constant. I'm not going to be able to combine those. So when I look at the right side, I have a constant and a variable, but again, those are different things. There's no x's here, so I can't combine them. So I'm done with step number 3. So now I'm going to move on to step number 4. And our step number 4 was to move the variables to the same side. Now again, I personally just like moving the smallest variable, which would be negative 20 in this case. So I'm going to move this negative 20x over here to the negative 12x. So the opposite of negative 20 is going to be positive 20, or to add 20. And when I do that, that's going to give me my 0 pair. So I'm left with a positive 10 on the left side equals, so now I'm going to move this positive 20 over here to this negative 12x. So I have negative 12x plus 20x. So in my calculator, I can type in negative 12 plus 20. And my calculator says that's 8x. And it is a positive 8, so I can go ahead and put a plus sign there in front of it. Now I'm still left with this negative 6, so I need to remember to bring down the negative sign and put it at 6 there. So now I'm done with number 4, and I'm going to move on to step number 5. And step number 5 is to move my constants to the other side. So again, my variables came over here to the right this time. So that means I'm going to move this negative 6 over here with the 10 this time. So I have a negative 6, and the inverse operation, or the opposite operation, would be to add 6 so that I can make that 0 pair. And I'm going to add 6 over here to the left. So 10 plus 6 is going to give me 16 equals, and I have this 8x. Okay. So on this one, I am going to be able to do step number 6. And step number 6 says to divide by the coefficient. And I told you that coefficient is that number that's being multiplied to the variable. So I'm going to divide both sides by 8. So x equals, and then 16 divided by 8 is going to give me 2. So the answer to this problem is x equals 2. Please make sure your variable is completely filled out. Now I'm going to go ahead and move on to example 3 and example 4. Okay, so I'm going to start again by drawing that line down that equal sign. And then we're just going to start looking at the steps and going through them. So step 1 is to eliminate my fractions. And I don't have any in my equation, so I'm going to move on. Step 2 says eliminate my parentheses, but if I look, I don't have any parentheses there. So then when I move on to step number 3, I look at my left side and I notice that I have an x and then I have a constant. So nothing to combine on the left side. And when I look at the right, I have a 6 and I have an x there. Two different things, can't combine them. So I'm done with step number 3. So for step number 4, I'm going to move the variables to the same side. All right. Now, just to show you that it doesn't matter if I move the smallest one or not, on this problem, I'm going to go ahead and move this 12x over. And it's a positive 12x, so to move it over, I need to do the opposite. So I'm going to subtract 12x. And make sure you're subtracting variables from variables, okay? So here's my 0 pair. So on the left side here, I'm left with negative 15 equals, now I have to do negative 3 minus 12. Okay, I have negative 3 minus, negative 3 minus 12. And that says negative 15 in my calculator, so that's negative 15 x's. And I still have this positive 6 that I need to move down. So now I'm done with step 4. And I'm going to move on to step number 5, which is to move my constants to the other side. So this negative 6 is going to move over here, this positive 6 is going to move over to my negative 15. And it is a positive 6, so to move it across the equal sign, I need to do the opposite, which would be to subtract 6. That gives me my 0 pair. And then I have negative 15 minus 6, okay? Negative 15 minus 6. Negative 21 equals, and I still have this negative 15x on the right side. So my last step is to divide by the coefficient. So on this problem, the negative 15 is multiplying to my x, so I'm going to divide both sides by negative 15. So x equals, so in my calculator, I'm going to do negative 21 divided by negative 15. And when I click enter, that gives me 7/5. Okay. Now, if this is a griddable question on your STAR test, you'll need to turn that 7/5 into a decimal. And we need to remember that to do that in our calculators, we're going to do 7 divided by 5, and we're going to put a decimal there. And then we'll click enter, and it'll turn it into a decimal for us. So multiple choice, hopefully 7/5 is there. If you need to put this in a griddable, then you'll turn it into a decimal and you'll get 1.4. So either one of those answers would be accepted. All right. Now it's time for our last example. And this one has some decimals in it. So just like I've started the other 3, I'm going to draw that line there to help me stay focused and to remind myself to do the inverse operation. So on this problem, when I start at step 1, it says eliminate fractions. I don't have any, so I'm going to move on to step 2, which is to eliminate parentheses. I don't have any in this problem, so I'm moving on to step number 3, which is to combine like terms. But if I look here at the left side, I have a variable and a constant, so I can't combine those. And then when I look at the right side, I have the same thing. I have a variable and a constant. So I can go ahead and move on to step number 4, sorry about that, which is to move the variables to the same side. So I just need to make sure to get those x's together. And I'm going to go ahead and move this 1/10 x over, and it's positive right now. So that line tells me to move it. I need to do the opposite, which would be minus 0.1x. And it gets subtracted from this 6/10 x. So right there, I have my zero pair. And then in my calculator, I would do 0.6 minus 0.1, and I would get 0.5x. Now, I still have this -5 that I need to move down. And over here on the right, I have a +7 that I need to move down. So now I can move on with step number 4, which is to get my constants to the other side. So my variables came over to the left. So this -5 needs to join that 7 over there on the right. Now it is a -5, so I need to go ahead and do the opposite or the inverse, which would be to add 5. That will give me my zero pair. I'm left with 0.5x equals 7 plus 5. That's going to give me 12. And then my last step is to divide by the coefficient, and it's 0.5. That's being multiplied to my x, or 5/10 is what I'm going to divide both sides by. So x equals, now 12 divided by 5. That's what I'm typing into the calculator. Or 0.5, sorry, 12 divided by 0.5. My answer is going to be 24. Okay. My fraction in my calculator looks like my paper right here. You need to make sure when you're dividing, they look the same. So my answer to number 4 is 24. All right, please make sure you have this down. And again, if you need to pause any part of this video, please do.